Hello, I'm Mark Morse, and you're watching Rediscovering the Beatles. Today I'm going to be talking about the time in 1976 when I wrote all the Beatles and the one Beatle who responded. So in 1976, I was 14 years old. I was probably at the peak of my Beatlemania. I was just reading everything I could get my hands on, buying whatever I could. And then I got the great idea. I'm going to write all of the Beatles in care of their record companies. And so I wrote a page two letter to each one of the Beatles. I was unsure if anybody would reply, but I really tried hard in my letters to show that I was a true fan and that if somebody should be replied to, it should be me. So it was the latter part of 1976, the last several months. I didn't write them all at once. I kind of took my time. I think I wrote them in the order of my favorites. I think I started with John Lennon, went to Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. I think I wrote them in that order. It took me a couple months to write all the letters. And then I sent them out, and it was late in the year. So when I did get my one response, it was probably in the first part of 1977. And when I say I got a response, I don't want to be a teaser and like they wrote me a personal letter and gave me advice or responded to my letter. What I got was a 8x10 glossy with a signature on it. So that's what I received. Now I thought it would be interesting if I went through and chronicled the things that all the Beatles were doing in 1976, what was going on in their lives and records. For John Lennon, a lot was going on in his life around this time. In 1975, he had reunited with Yoko after the famous or the infamous Lost Weekend. He had also gave birth to, or Yoko gave birth, he was there, gave birth to Sean Lennon on October 9th, 1975, and he had decided that he was going to give up his music career, to focus all of his attention on his son. Also going on for John in 1975 was he was being sued by Morse Levy for a lyric in his Beatles song Come Together. As part of the agreement, John Lennon had to put 3 Morse Levy songs on his upcoming album Rock and Roll, which I do have a copy of that. Here's the this is got it for Christmas, so I know this is a first copy. It's kind of an interesting little album. I didn't appreciate it much at the time, but I like it more as I get older. Anyway, there were so many problems with Rock and Roll that it didn't get released until after Walls and Bridges. So when the Walls and Bridges album came out and Morse Levy saw that his 3 songs weren't on there, he sued Lennon again because he thought that was the album where the songs were supposed to be on. So he had a lot of legal stuff going on. And then in 1976, John Lennon had been fighting for his residency in the United States, and he finally got his green card in 1976. Also in 1976, John Lennon had written the song Cookin' in the Kitchen of Love for ex-Beatle Ringo Starr, and he actually performed with Ringo on Ringo's album, Ringo's Rotograver. I hope I'm saying that right. I've never been able to pronounce that correctly. But that would be the last time that Lennon would be in a recording session until 1980. So John had a lot going on around this time. Paul McCartney also had a lot going on around this time. In March of 1976, the Wings album, Wings at the Speed of Sound, was released, and it went to #1 in the U.S. charts. Wings of the Speed of Sound was released during the very successful tour Wings Over the World. This is where in 1975 and 1976 Wings toured places like Europe, Britain, the United States, Canada. I have a copy of that album too. This was released in 1976. This triple album called Wings Over America. So Paul absolutely had a lot going on that year as well. The third Beatle I wrote was George Harrison, and in 1976 he had just made his first release on his very own label, Dark Horse. The album was 33 1/3, and it contained some hits on there. This song and Cracker Jack Palace. It's one of my favorite George Harrison albums, to be honest. George also had some legal battles going on. He was being sued by Bright Tunes Music for the song My Sweet Lord, which he actually lost that case in 1976. And so this song is definitely about that experience. The last Beatle I wrote was Ringo Starr, and Ringo's Rotograver album had come out that year. He had promoted it a lot, but it didn't do great. It had a couple minor hits in the United States, but did not fare very well. So this was a tough year for Ringo. So I don't remember exactly what I put in these letters. Some of the things I remember, though, were with John Lennon. He was going to get his green card years previously, and my brother had bought the album sometime in New York City, and there was a petition you could sign and have people sign and send in to him. So I had done that. I think I mentioned that in the letter. I remember addressing the letter to John Lennon and Yoko Ono, thinking, oh, he'll see that I'm not a Yoko hater, and he'll take more time in responding to this. John Lennon was of all the Beatles, was the one I was least likely to hear from, or that's what I felt. I'm like, I'm probably not going to hear from John, but I really hoped I would. The next one, Paul McCartney, I can't remember what I wrote in his letter. I absolutely have no memory. With George Harrison, the 33 1/3 album had just come out when I was writing his letter, so I wrote about the songs on there. I wrote about some of the funny little things I noticed in the album, which I have here. There were some pictures of, I don't have that anymore. Where is that? Oh, inside the cover is little things like this holy friar holding a holy friar. I mentioned goofy things like that in that letter. I thought maybe George would respond. I wasn't real sure about any of them. And then Ringo, I have no memory what I wrote Ringo or what I could have said about Ringo. But oddly enough, I felt Ringo would be the most likely to respond to me. That was just my prejudice, thinking, Ringo, out of all the Beatles, he probably doesn't get to sign as many autographs. I was 14. And this was long before I realized that Ringo had his distaste for signing autographs, and now he refuses to sign any autographs. He doesn't want anybody sending him mail, anything like that. But I thought Ringo would be the most likely to respond. So months went by, and like I said, it was probably the first part of 1977 before I heard anything. Three of the Beatles never got anything, never heard anything. And then I came home from school one day, and my mother said, "Hey, you got a package from George Harrison." And I was so excited. Because in my mind, I'm like, oh, George loved my letter. He's probably sent me a little handwritten letter or something like that. That's what was my big hope was. That's not what I got. The envelope, I didn't save the envelope, or if I did, I've misplaced it. But I wish I would have saved the envelope because it was kind of a cool envelope. It had the Dark Horse emblem on the return address and stuff. It was pretty cool. But what was in there was this 8x10 glossy signed by George Harrison. And even though I was pretty sure these things were mass produced, I was more than excited. I think I mentioned I belong to a Facebook page called Show Us Your Beatles Collection, and I had posted this on there, and I had said I was probably the happiest 14-year-old boy in Iowa that day, and I truly was. I was so excited about it. I actually keep this photograph in his 33 and a third album, which I've listened to a lot, and it's in pretty beat up condition. It is one of my favorite albums, though. Definitely one of my favorite George Harrison albums. I still think it's great. I don't think there's every song on there I really like, but I've always held a special place for George just because, even if he didn't reply personally, he took the time to have somebody, staff, or I don't know how that stuff works, but I got something back, and I think I may have sent money along with all these records, maybe just all these letters. I think I might have sent a couple bucks in there to pay for postage, just to encourage him to write back. But I was so excited to get that, and it's still just a favorite memory of mine. So that's my story of 1976, when I was 14 years old and I wrote all the Beatles, and George Harrison wrote me back. So that's kind of what I want this channel to be, more of this kind of personal history. I like telling a history of songs and albums and stuff about the Beatles, mainly because if I'm going to talk about it, I have to read about it and kind of learn about it myself. And I like gaining that knowledge. I always like to remind people in these videos that I am not a Beatles historian. I'm not a great collector. I don't know about record releases, which records were printed where, first pressings, any of that stuff. I just really like the Beatles, and some people might say I love the Beatles, but I do like to collect things. Right now I'm collecting the UK EPs, and I think they released 13 official UK releases, and two of them were supposed to show up yesterday, but here in Iowa the weather has been crazy, and got like 20 inches of snow in 4 days. And so the postal service has been closed down, so I'm hoping early next week I'll have those. But anyway, thank you for watching. I really am happy that you're here. I hope you enjoy the Beatles as much as I do, and I'll see you soon. And always remember, there's nothing you can do that can't be done. That's going to be my ending thing, I think. Thank you.